Last week you told someone something that actually mattered to you. Their face did exactly what it did when you told them about the traffic. You've replayed it since. Not what they said back. The nothing that happened first. And you walked out of that room certain of exactly one thing. There is something going on in there. That certainty is tonight's specimen. Not them. Your certainty. Because you didn't detect depth in that face. You detected nothing at all. And something in you swapped one for the other before you noticed. So tonight we cut it open. What reading a person actually is mechanically, and what happens inside you the moment it fails. Let's begin. First, the mechanism. And I have to take something off you before we start. You have never once read a face. Not the face itself. Never the face itself. What you read is a change. Test it. The stranger opposite you on the train. Composed. Giving you nothing. You don't call them unreadable. You don't call them anything. Their face is carrying exactly as much information as your closest friends. You simply have nothing to subtract it from. That's the operation. Reading a person is subtraction. What they're doing now minus what they do at rest. The second half of that sum is the part nobody thinks about. At rest, their baseline. You built that baseline without ever deciding to. 1,000 unremarkable minutes. The way their hands sit when nothing is happening. Costs you nothing. You don't remember collecting a single one. But it's the only reason you can tell your brother is upset from across a car park. And here's what that means. Readability isn't in them. It's the size of your file. Which is why your mother knows before you say it. And why you were impossible to read for your first boss for 2 years, and then suddenly you weren't. You didn't become expressive. Nothing about you changed. She just finished the file. So when you say someone is impossible to read, listen to what you actually said. You said your file is thin. Then you blamed them for it. Now here's the turn. Some people are thin files by construction. Not because you haven't watched. Because there's nothing in the watching to keep. First finding. Unreadable is not a face. It's a subtraction that keeps returning 0. Second cut. So what's actually happening inside a person who returns 0 every time you look? The lazy answer is that they're hiding it. Holding a lid down over something moving underneath. That's the story you've been sold. It's wrong in a specific and useful way. Hiding requires a reaction to hide. It has a size. A thing pushed down leaves a shape. And you are excellent at reading the shape of a push. Everyone is. A held still hand is not a still hand, and you clock it in half a second. The genuinely unreadable person isn't pushing anything down. That's the finding, and it's the one nobody wants. They didn't hide the reaction. They have the reaction at a volume you cannot see from where you're sitting. The same amplitude at a funeral and at a promotion. Not because they feel the same, because both arrive through the same narrow door. And now you're some breaks. Subtraction needs a difference. You've been handed the same number twice. So you look harder. That's the trap. Looking harder at a flat baseline only produces more 0 faster. Now the humane part, and I want it said clearly. Most of these people aren't doing anything to you. A flat baseline is usually a bill somebody already paid. Reactions were expensive in the house they grew up in. So the volume got turned down and left there. They are not withholding from you. They stopped broadcasting years before you arrived. And they can't hear it any better than you can. Second finding. They're not concealing the signal. The signal is small, it's been small a long time, and some of what's down there they would have loved to show you. Third cut, and this is where the video actually lives. What does your mind do when the sum comes back with nothing? It does not say unknown. That's the thing. It never says unknown. A blank on a form gets filled. That's what forms do to us. And you have exactly one material on hand to fill it with. You, your fears, your hopes about them, the last person who stood like that. It all pours straight into the gap. Around 1919, a Russian filmmaker, Lev Kuleshov, cut one blank shot of an actor against 3 others. A bowl of soup, a coffin, a woman. Audiences praised his hunger, his grief, his desire. It was the same unchanging frame all 3 times. They weren't watching him. They were watching what sat next to him, and putting it on his face. That isn't a trick of cinema. That's what your face reading does all day long. It usually has real material to work with, so you never catch it doing it. Hand it a blank and the machine doesn't stop. It runs on whatever else is in the room, which is you. So the person you can't read becomes the most interesting person at the table. Of course they do. They're made of you and you're a very good writer. Every silence they left, you answered. And you always answered generously. The blank gets filled with depth. Never with vacancy. Nobody has ever met someone impossible to read and concluded they were shallow. Not once. The blank always reads as more. That's why they're magnetic. Not because they're deep. Because you can't stop writing, and you happen to like your own handwriting. You've been in love with this. Most people have. The one you couldn't figure out who turned out eventually to be exactly as advertised. The disappointment wasn't that they changed. It's that the file finally filled up with them, and all of yours had to come out. Third finding, and it's the whole video. The unreadable person is a mirror you mistook for a window. Now turn the specimen over, because if a blank gets filled with whatever's convenient, somebody was always going to notice that. Two people give off the identical nothing. One has nothing to declare. The other has watched what the nothing does to you. And here's the ugly part. The blank works the same either way. It doesn't need intent to take money off you. So, ethics. Out loud, once. Everything past this point is for keeping your own material in your own hands. It is not a kit for going quiet at people who trust you. The interview blank. They give you nothing while you talk, and by minute 3 you're saying things you decided in the car not to say. The flat reply. 6 words back when you sent 60. You'll spend all night deciding what those 6 words meant, and every meaning will be yours. The withheld verdict. They simply never say whether it was good, and you spend a week producing better work for someone who didn't ask for any. None of that requires a plan. Some of it comes with one, and you cannot tell which from the outside, which is exactly why the tells aren't about them. So, for tells, watch where every single one of them points. Tell 1. Read the file, not the face. Ask how many ordinary hours you've actually banked on this person. If the answer is under 100, they're not impossible to read. They're new, and the mystery you're feeling is just arithmetic. Tell 2. Check who's doing the talking in your head. Real not knowing is quiet. If you've got a whole theory of them, that isn't perception. That's authorship. Tell 3. Does the blank ever cost them anything? A real one is flat everywhere. Flat when it's expensive. Flat when a warmer face would have got them exactly what they wanted. A blank that goes warm precisely when warm pays, and flat precisely when flat pays, isn't a baseline. It's a dial, and somebody's hand is on it. Tell 4, and it's the only one that settles it. Stop building. Say your reading of them out loud, plainly, and hand it across. A person with a small baseline will correct you. Awkwardly, usually, and straight away. Being written wrong is unpleasant when you aren't using it. The construction lets it stand, because your story is doing their work for them, and correcting you would cost them the only thing they've got. Last cut. And it isn't about them. Somewhere right now, someone is holding a thick file on you that you never wrote a word of. You've been the unreadable one. The meeting where you went flat because flat was cheaper than being seen. The table where you let someone finish your sentence with something more interesting than the truth. You didn't lie. You went blank and let them do the writing. And it was a relief, wasn't it? So here's tonight's finding. The person you called impossible to read, you weren't reading them. You were reading aloud and calling at them. Nothing about them changes tonight. Only the file, and whose handwriting is in it.